And welcome back. And we're getting ready to move into our first conversation for today, as we're joined by representatives of the opposition, Deputy Leader for the People's United Party, Kareem Musa. Good morning and welcome, and thank you for being here.
Morning, and thank you again for having me on.
You know, it's always nice to have you on, especially in light of the recent events and what's been going on. You know, people have been hearing about it, and so it's actually, I would want to say, the trend right now. People are actually sticking to it. The position of the PUP in terms of the redistribution and, of course, re-registration. Where do you stand? Where does the PUP stand?
Well, let me first of all say the hallmark of any good, thriving democracy is a country's ability to hold free and fair elections. As you know, there are so many components that make up what is considered a fair election. And one of them is that the voters list in each constituency must be made up of individuals who actually live and reside in that particular constituency. Now, for the last 20 years, that voters list has not been updated since 1997. That was the last re-registration exercise. It was originally scheduled to take place in 2007, which was only 10 years later. But because there was an election that was looming in 2008, the political parties agreed to put it off for another 5 years. That took it to 2012, and as you know, there was another general election called early for 2012, so it could not have been done. So once again, it was postponed for another 5 years. So here we are sitting here 20 years later, and there has not been a re-registration exercise. But by law, one is due July 1st of 2017. And so the People's United Party finds it necessary to come out and demand at this point. Because last year in the House of Representatives, we had an inkling that in fact the government would make another move to postpone this outdated, this long-awaited re-registration exercise. And so I asked the Prime Minister in the House of Representatives, are you going to follow the law and carry out a re-registration exercise in 2017? I thought he was going to say yes, because he started off saying yes, but then he said, no wait, we're going to put it off. The government is going to put it off until after the municipal elections. Now, in the party's position, the government has no legitimate excuse to put off the re-registration exercise at this time. Last night on Channel 7 News, you saw the Honorable Michael Finnegan giving you a little insight into the government's perspective as to why they might not want to carry out a re-registration exercise. And one of the factors he pointed to, he was saying it is a very costly exercise. Now, I don't understand for the life of me, and I'm sure my party shares the same position, that a government, a party, can spend $40 million 1 month before the general elections. I'm talking about the 2015 general elections. It is on record. They spent $40 million in 1 month. No accounting whatsoever. None at all how that money was spent. But yet, they can't find $5 million to actually ensure that that electoral process is free and fair and that it is updated. Now, there is no possible way to ever get a foolproof electoral list, because if you do re-registration now, chances are some politicians will start padding the list from now. But what I can tell you is that it would reduce the amount of, if we want to just use it loosely, voter fraud. It would reduce the amount by 75%, because it has been 20 years of padding up the list.
What do you call voter fraud? Are you talking about persons who don't reside in a constituency?
Yes, okay. But like I said, I'm using the term very loosely, but it's not necessary. It's individuals moving in the direction of a particular politician of their choice. So every July and August, politicians, and especially the good ones who have been there for so long, they take the opportunity to move individuals into their constituency who do not reside there. And so we have 20 long years of that taking place.
Now, let's look at this process, because one of the questions I have is looking at the opportunities that do exist to prevent this type of behavior. And our laws are set up in a way that it should be able to prevent this type of activity. One, as you pointed out, every summer people have the opportunity to be able to register to vote in the constituency that they live.
Yes.
The Elections and Boundaries Department is responsible to vet these persons. This is a process that should allow for the legitimizing of the voters list. That's one opportunity. Secondly, before the elections, the voters lists are presented to the different political parties, and you go through your own individual process of vetting these persons and can file your complaint within this specified number of days. So I want to ask you, while I think no person in Belize, once they understand what the re-registration exercise is, can doubt that it is necessary 20 years later, haven't there been opportunities to be able to weed out these lists of people who have been fraudulently or illegitimately put in these areas?
I 100% agree with you that each year, whenever there is this transfer period, politicians in various constituencies, if they know their people, would be able to object to individuals residing at a particular address. But you have to also understand that in many down times, like right now, some constituencies don't have a standard bearer. And so the committees and the standard bearers, whether it's UDP or PUP, are not active. So they're not there to catch them. And that is where it is now important for the government, a responsible government, to ensure that we have a free and fair elections. Imagine as a young politician, I'm not that young, so I won't use me, but a newcomer to an election process comes in to say Queen Square or Mesopotamia, and he walks that division and he goes to an address. And when he gets to that address, he sees on his voters list that there are 10, 15 people registered at this address. Now, there's not even a house there. So he won't find a house. He won't find the people who are on his list. But that is where I think Jules Vasquez refers to them as phantom voters. Some other people refer to them as homeless voters because there's no home there. So the ruling politicians normally, I'm not accusing any side, again, I'm trying to stay down the middle here. The ruling politicians usually have those individuals on their secret list. So they know where those individuals live. They know the phone numbers for those individuals. So there is a distinct advantage for the ruling party and for the ruling politician. So as a newcomer to the process, you are totally discouraged because you don't get to present your platform to these voters.
Because you can't find them.
You can't find them. So it is a real disadvantage that it places newcomers coming into the electoral process that has been padded up for so many years. And padding is only one of the factors why we need re-registration. Another is the fact that many of the voters have passed away, unfortunately. Again, it's a 20-year process, but the voters list has not been cleaned up. This is why recently the government had to pass legislation to change the Referendum Act because it's difficult to get 60%. Because either people have passed away on that voters list or people have migrated to other parts of the world. So those are two other reasons why we need to clean up. And the last reason was unveiled last week, and this is the most important reason why we need re-registration. Because the former Director of Immigration, Ms. Ruth Main, in the Senate Select Inquiry, she confessed that prior to the 2012 general elections, ministers were in the immigration department. They don't belong in there, first of all. They were in there to expedite unqualified immigrants to get their Belizean nationality. And so we have hundreds of thousands of individuals who not only got nationality, but shortly thereafter got put on a voters list. If you remember, going back to the 2012 elections, some registration offices, big night, some guys were taking in some manila envelopes by the ton loads to get individuals.
And it's captured on video.
It's captured on video to get these individuals onto the voters' roll. And if you look back at that general elections, the People's United Party lost by only 60 votes.
Well, isn't it arguable, though, that even with a re-registration exercise, those persons who have been illegally given their nationalities and allowed on the voters list wouldn't be weed out of that process?
Yes, you're right. Those individuals, there's no way, let me not say there's no way, because in the instance of Wong Hong Kim, his passport was revoked. No.
But you're talking one sensational case
One
out
sensational
of
case,
possible thousands.
but I think the onus and the responsibility is on the government and its officials to go through each and every one of those nationalities to see, okay, one, it was missing up a photograph, let us get that photograph. Whatever it is that makes them unqualified, try to rectify the problem. And for those like Wong Hong Kim who never set foot in Belize, you have to revoke those nationalities. It is a must, and the people of Belize demand that. So it would be an extensive exercise, I agree with you, to do that. But the chances are, Marlene, that if we were to carry out a re-registration exercise, individuals who may have gotten their nationality, some of them do not reside here, really. They only cross the border when it's time for an election. So chances are they might not come to re-register because they're caught up in their own world in Guatemala or Salvador, wherever they come from. They might not come for a re-registration. And two, they have no residence here in Belize City. So when the personnel from elections and boundaries goes to a particular residence, they won't find those individuals there because they don't really live here. And so it would reduce the amount of voter fraud. That's the argument that we are making.
Had the PUP won the 2012 general elections, because it was a loss of about what, 800?
Like 60 votes.
Okay, so 60 votes. Had the PUP won that 2012 election, because folks are saying, especially those who are actually riding along with the other side, this is the cry of the PUP because they didn't win, and it's something that eventually happened a few years ago. So had the PUP won that election, would this have been the same situation? Would you have rectified the situation?
We will never know because we did not win. What exactly took place? We only have, we can only guess from the images, from the video taking place prior to the 2012 election of people registering individuals who did not qualify. But I am absolutely certain that if we can point to individuals who did not qualify, I believe that we will be able to take measures to ensure that they are removed not only from the voters list, but their nationality as well if they did not qualify legally. So I believe that could have been done. It's a very difficult exercise by any means, but certainly we would have to take steps to rectify that.
Now you are admitting or acknowledging, I should say, the amount of work that will go into this exercise. And again, I go back to it. It is beyond the time that it should have been done. 20 years later, our population is now 350,000. So we obviously need to be able to have the re-registration exercise done. So the argument from the government is it is going to be costly, one. And secondly, with an election cycle for the municipal government so close that it is the wrong time. How would you suggest, and I know you all, the People's United Party has undertaken the effort of shadow ministers. How would you undertake to be able to find the funding for this exercise and be able to execute it efficiently before an election?
Yes, there's no doubt that it's going to be a very costly exercise. Like I said, I estimate it will be somewhere around $5 million. The Prime Minister might say it is going to cost more. That is only the government spending. Mind you, political parties would also need to have funding as well. So there's no advantage for me as Kareem Musa, as area representative for Caribbean Shores, to say, go re-registration, I won my seat. Yeah. The importance here is that there are a lot of other divisions all across this country. I can point to Belize Rural South, I can point to Kaya West. There are particular divisions that are extremely padded. And so we want to make it fair across the board. So there's no particular advantage for me to say, let's re-register. None at all, because I won my seat. But we have to look out for the other divisions, and it's going to be costly. It's going to be costly on me as well, because you have to mobilize, you have to pay workers to assist other voters to get into the election mode, even though we're in an off season, to go and re-register. Now, we are only, next month we'll make 1 year away from a municipal election. But the argument that I'm going to make is that we are always 1 year away from some sort of an election or another. So when are we going to do the re-registration exercise? This government has called 2 early general elections. My fear, and that of the parties and Belize, is that the United Democratic Party will call an early general election and not update this voters' roll.
So you're saying that there will never be a right time?
There will never be a right time, but I would say now is the right time.
Okay, and in addition to that, the question I posed earlier is, where would you suggest that the government find the funds to be able to do it?
Well, that should have been in their budget, Marlene. As you know, the re-registration exercise is something on the books, on the law books. So if the Prime Minister did not envision that, I'm saying then you may have squandered the money a little too much on your streets and roundabouts in places that they ought never to have been, and overspent on those roundabouts. But July 1st, 2017, this budget that the Prime Minister is going to present in March ought to have envisioned that they're going to need $5 million to allocate to re-register. This is a fundamental principle of our democracy, a pillar of our democracy, that we can beat our chest to the world and say we have a thriving, healthy democracy. So if you can't find $5 million to win elections that you love to win every 5 years or every 3 years, then something is clearly wrong.
Now, the re-registration exercise, as you pointed out, is something that the People's United Party is officially sounding the alarm on for the Belizean public. You've also indicated that if necessary, you will take legal action to attempt to get the government to undertake this exercise. How strong do you feel your case will be?
I believe very strong. I think the BPP may have taken, I need to look at this, but they took an action prior to the last or after the last general election to have it declared null and void. But I think their point was on redivision. Yeah. But the former legal advisor to the party, Mr. Anthony Sylvester, said he had a look at it and he said it was a very sound case. So I believe constitutionally we have a very sound case to have not only a re-registration exercise, but a redivision exercise, or redistricting as it is commonly known. But the party plans to take several actions in addition to a legal action. We plan to, well, I personally have met with representatives from the International Republican Institute, the IRI, and I have voiced my concerns to them, and they took serious concern with it as well, that it is now 20 years and they want to put it off even further. Either this week or next week, we plan to write the Carter Center for Democracy to inform them of what is taking place in Belize. And of course, what I think is very important is an education campaign, taking it to the schools, taking it into the sixth forms and the universities, because many students who are now 20 years old or 21 years old don't know what a re-registration exercise is. They were born in 1998, 1997, so they don't know what it is. They didn't experience it. Even I was in my teens when that took place, so I didn't really grasp it. So there needs to be an education campaign so that our people can understand how important it is for us to update our electoral rolls and to make the entire process free and fair.
Let's get back to the inquiry. Like we mentioned, it's the thing out there, everybody's listening to it, and things are being blown, are actually showing up. You've been hearing about this, you've been hearing about that, and the entire process of immigration. Now, following the inquiries and this thing gets blown out of proportion, what would be the position then of the PUP?
Well, it is expected that at the end of this inquiry, because like you said, there are so many revelations, startling revelations, eye-openers for Belizeans coming out of this Senate Select inquiry, that it is incumbent on this Senate Select Committee to make recommendations. They need to sit down, caucus, and make recommendations to the government on the way forward. The government has a majority on that committee, so I am not expecting that it's going to be something like they're going to be firing this one and terminating this one and stripping this minister. I am hopeful that that will happen because there are gross instances of irregularities in the immigration department coming out. So I'm hoping that those recommendations lead to something of substance, because this government has a very proud track record of doing nothing when it comes to the corruption in the immigration department. They voice it. Last night, the Honorable Finnegan says, I didn't write any recommendations. I don't go to the lands department. I didn't do any of that. But you're one of 31. So you need to now account for your brothers and your sisters on that side whose names are called in that audit report.
Now, let's talk a bit about the redivision or the redistricting exercise. This has been one, I think, that usually around each election cycle we discuss very much. When we look at how the constituencies are divided in this country, and it's been that way, this is, again, part of the purpose of having this entire exercise be done. It can be seen as an advantage for some political parties and a disadvantage for some. Let's talk about what your position is on the redistricting exercise.
Redivision.
Sorry. And how you would envision the proper process to take place. Should it be based on number of persons? Should it be based on number of households? What are the guidelines that you think will be best suited for this exercise?
I believe that in order for us to have a proportional representation democracy, which is what we're supposed to have, each division, in my mind, should have approximately 5,000 to 6,000 voters in their divisions. I think I heard the Honorable Michael Finnegan say that he would say around 3,000 to 4,000. I don't agree with that. I don't agree with enlarging the number of constituencies in this country. When you look at other jurisdictions like Jamaica, they have a representative for every 30, 50,000 people. We only have for every 3 to 10,000 people. So definitely the divisions that have 10,000 voters or more, I would say those need to be divided so that you create more divisions so that it is equitable. In my mind, what is an ideal number to have would be between 5,000 and 6,000 voters. There are some divisions in Belize City, like Fort George, like Pickstock, that have 3,000 plus voters, really small. So that, again, is disproportionate. So you might want to join some of those divisions and then divide the larger ones. But I think 31 constituencies at the end of the day is something good to have. It's just a way to make everybody have an equal number of voters. Like I said, in my opinion, some members of my party differ on that, but between 5,000 and 6,000 voters.
Let's point out the situation as it is. This is a political issue because of where the strongholds are said to be for major political parties. The People's United Party, for example, has been very successful in rural areas in most elections. The United Democratic Party has been very strong in the city. And the city has more constituencies than the rural areas. So when explaining this particular process to the public and why it's important, how do you separate the political aspect? That, in other words, the PUP isn't pushing for multiplying the areas you're more successful or shrinking the areas where the UDP is more successful.
I can give you a glaring example I just did. For example, Fort George is a PUP constituency. In my personal opinion, it should be joined along with another division. So I'm not being partisan here. I'm actually showing you a PUP division that should join with another one. A constituency like Belmopan has 10,000 plus voters. That is too much. It's a UDP constituency. It should be divided, in my opinion. That would create 2 UDP constituencies if you go on that. But I agree with you fully that I would be stepping on anybody's toe, whichever direction I go. And so it's a very difficult position to hold. But if you want to be fair and if you want to give an unbiased opinion, you have to show exactly, look at the numbers, and you would see what needs to be joined and what needs to be divided so that at the end of the day, you can accomplish that 5,000 to 6,000 voter region.
But not necessarily an expansion of the number of constituencies.
Yeah, I don't see that necessary. And I think you alluded to this in your question, that the power base is Belize City, and they might not want to join small constituencies like Queen Square with Mesopotamia or with Albert, those again also have 3,000
Very
voters
small.
because they're the ruling party and because that is where their power base is. That to me is not being fair. You have to come out open and say, you know what, I am the Prime Minister of this country, I have a small division, I don't mind it joining up with another one, especially since he probably will not be running again. So it should not hurt him personally, but it's just to, at the end of the day, be fair.
Yeah.
In being, you're right on the bat when it comes to that, because that's a sentiment of actually of Belizeans, whereby we would want to see fair elections and of course transparency. Now, with the position of the PUP, and I keep on mentioning this because this is a gripe of the others, in terms of the whole voter process, in terms of Belizeans being treated properly, what would be then the position of the PUP, especially in terms of us going back into elections, or especially if the UDP would call an early elections without having to go back on this or padding, because we make mention of the padding. What then would be the position of your PUP and your strategy in terms of having to deal with that?
To participate in that election, once again, I agree with you. It's a tough decision to make. Other nations, you see political parties, when they object to the electoral rolls and there is nothing done to them, some parties boycott the general elections because it is not fair. I don't think that the PUP can afford to do that right now because the country is in a mess. So we must challenge the next general election, whether they update the rules or not. But again, that's not a decision for me to take, but I know that in other jurisdictions, political parties, opposition parties decide to boycott because it is not a fair election.
All right. Well, Kareem, of course, we're grateful that you stopped in this morning to be able to share the People's United Party's position on this exercise. What can we expect to be? You spoke of several actions that you intend to take in addition to legal course of action. What will be the next step that we will see?
Well, we have to continue with our advocacy. I think that it is certainly gaining traction with the public. Yesterday morning, I heard it on several talk shows as being one of the #1 issues. You know, this is an issue that I think political parties, the UDP, the PUP, and the BPP, the members understand the importance of it. And I think that they can say, yes, we need re-registration, but some voters out there, they're happy where they vote, and they might not live in that area. So they might say, man, I don't want to go through that process. They are going to re-register again. But again, it is important to have an education campaign to show the importance of why we need that electoral re-registration exercise to take place this year. So that is going to be our way forward. Advocacy, again, possible legal action, and internationalizing this situation.
You know, especially for young voters or those who are actually now 20 years old, who will be able to vote in the next in the upcoming election or the next election, one of the things that would be a scary thought to them is not even a scary thought, but the back and forth, the fighting, with all the nonsense that takes place, especially within the house, or me saying this, you saying that, on other parties. What is the PUP position in terms of trying to bring these people in? Because it's very important. Remember, going out there to vote is actually you having your say.
Yes.
It's a democratic process.
Yes.
People are actually afraid, not even afraid, but they feel like it's a waste of time to be in the sun hot, in this line trying to vote. Then eventually we hear this and we hear that.
Yeah.
How do we get rid of this process? So what would be your position in terms of getting rid of this process and trying to get young voters out there?
That is the job of politicians, to inspire. I think that is where each political party has to put up candidates that can inspire the young people. You rightly said that in past general elections, the young people, there are so many of them, but only 5% of them come out to vote. And so at the end of the day, you're pointing in the right direction that they are disillusioned by politicians. And so the new age politician has to be able to inspire young people. We have to be able to get them more involved. And that can only happen if you go out, you meet with them and explain to them the importance of your vote, like you rightly said, and the importance of re-registering or even registering, because many of them are not going to register in the first place. So we have to be able to get the young people 18 and over out to register and to vote. I agree with you.
We've got a lot of young leaders out there, a lot of young people who actually want to be a part of it. But like we mentioned, this thing is a dirty game.
Yeah,
and it's something that I think, from my perspective, that we need to wipe off so we could eventually bring out these young leaders.
You know, I'm a little hopeful because we have a new Speaker of the House. Speaking specifically on the behavior of members of Parliament, I am very hopeful. The last two occasions with the new Madam Speaker, I am impressed by her. She was able to temper both sides down. There's not that much name calling. There still was a little, but there's not that much. So I am very hopeful going forward that we can turn this thing around and we can make it known to the world that we want to be, nice to each other.
But in taking off the Kareem Musa hat and the PUP hat, actually, Kareem Musa's perspective in terms of a respectable individual out there, you're out there. What do you say to young people who actually want to be in the forefront to lead? How do you encourage these people to say, you know what, come on out and lead?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. That needs to happen. Each political party has their youth arm. For instance, the People's United Party has a BYM, and I'm sure the BPP probably has a youth arm as well. But there are different ways to get involved. And once you can get involved in, for example, the youth arm and show your leadership skills in that arm, I think that would propel you certainly into the future, climbing that ladder to get at the top of the political party. So there is that way to get involved at various aspects, whether it's the women's group, whether it's the marshals, whether it's the BYM. So certainly many opportunities for young people and old to get involved in the electoral process.
All right. Well, Kareem, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
All right. We're going to go ahead now and take a break. When we come back, we'll be talking about a platform that can be used to find jobs here in Belize. So stay tuned.